I see so many people make these 5 content creation mistakes. Some of these are purely my opinion, some of these are fact, and some of these I've just seen all across social media of some content creation icks. So here are my top 5 content creation icks and some solutions to maybe fix them. The first is this concept called the millennial pause. So this is actually a newer term, and this is something that I used to do in my content all the time. But those of us that are millennials, we actually hit record and then take a pause before we actually start talking. And therefore Gen Z has coined the term the millennial pause. This is super common amongst us millennials because when we first had devices, handheld devices that we could record on, you know, the first smartphones, some digital cameras, things like that, when you would hit the record button, it would not start recording right away. So we have adapted to creating content that we hit the record button, we take a pause, okay, now it's recording. Whereas smartphones nowadays, or if you're recording inside of TikTok, the minute you hit that record button, the video is actually recording. So why this doesn't happen for Gen Z is because they are very used to Snapchat. In the format there, again, the minute you hit record, it is going to start recording. So this might not seem like that big of a deal to you, but it really is because it's going to affect the retention rate of someone watching your video. If you think about it, our attention spans are already short enough when it comes to consuming short form content. You literally have seconds to capture somebody's attention, and their attention can go away and they can start to scroll just as fast. So what you're gonna wanna do is you need to eliminate any of that dead space in your short form content. You wanna do this to ensure that people not only stop and watch your video, but they continue watching it through completion. And if every time you stop or hit that record button again, if there's that slight pause, people might get annoyed with it and scroll on. I know that I'm guilty of it. So 2 things I want to note here before we move on to the next ick. First, JT Barnett actually talked about this specific topic in a recent interview that he did.
But in short form, you have to cut out all of the pauses because it's retention and getting people's attention. Yeah. But in longer form, when I'm watching somebody on a podcast or I'm watching somebody's longer vlogs and they're sitting and they pause for a second and then they say something and they actually like think about it for a second and say something, I internalize that as, oh, fuck, that was more important. I need to take more from that.
How these general pauses and the ums and the ahs do not work on short form video, but they work really well in that long form content. But for the short form content, we need to start to eliminate anything that would distract the viewer or cause them to scroll. And really quickly, I'm gonna show you how I do that here, because guess what? I am still very guilty of doing the millennial pause when I record, but in the editing process, I make sure to kind of cut that pause out. Once you have your video inside your preferred editing app, whether you're editing in Instagram or in TikTok, you can do this as well. But basically what you're gonna notice is there is a brief pause right in the beginning. And what you're gonna wanna do is, I'm just gonna let this play for a second. And basically what you're gonna wanna do is just trim the beginning of it until you start talking, and then you would do the same with the ending of the clip. So you're gonna wanna do this, go through each of your clips and make sure you're getting rid of that pause. My next biggest social media ick is actually hidden text. I see this all across social media, and this is just a huge pet peeve of mine when people try to hide certain text or elements, whether it's in Instagram stories, on TikToks. Sometimes it's done consciously for a particular reason, and sometimes it's done unintentionally. Sometimes you make a complete and total mistake by accidentally adding your subtitles on a TikTok a little too low, and now the caption covers it. Or maybe sometimes you put a little bit of text on your reel that's too close to the edge of the screen and it gets cut off when you post it. And while those are accidental, some people actually go and hide text for a specific purpose, reason, or gimmick. And the latest that I've seen of this, there's a tactic known as keyword stuffing. And I see a lot of people not only doing this, but I see experts trying to promote this. And it's very prominent on TikTok, but essentially what you do is you take text and you stuff in keywords. So you're not adding any value, you're not adding text on top of the screen, you're not adding subtitles. You are just adding things that might help you pop up in a search. So for me, I might do a keyword stuffing text on the screen that says something like content strategy, content strategist, content ideas, and these would all be separated by commas. Then what people do is make that text super, super small, or they drag it off screen so that you can't see it. And while, again, this might not seem like a big deal, this is something that could potentially harm you in the long run. This was a common SEO practice before Google started shutting this kind of content down. People would often shove in these keywords throughout a blog post and highlight the text and make it white so it wasn't visible, in hopes of ranking higher on Google. And that same principle is now starting to find its way into social media, media. And again, while TikTok might not ding you right now, it's just not a good standard practice to do. And my next biggest ick is improper formatting. This is personally an ick for me, but it's also a big social media no-no. Think about it this way. Have you ever watched a horizontal video on TikTok, a vertical video that you find on YouTube but not YouTube Shorts, or maybe you see like a horizontal image that was meant for Facebook kind of shoved into a square format for Instagram? No matter where you decide to post, and if you want to repost content, you have to keep that platform in mind. So for example, you might be watching this exact clip on YouTube as the full length video, or you might be catching this as a short form video on Reels, TikTok, Shorts, or an idea pin. And while this is the same clip being played on multiple different platforms, my team and I have taken the time to make sure that this piece of content is dedicated to the specific format of that platform. So you can repurpose and reuse and create content for multiple platforms all at one time. You just have to make sure that it's formatted properly for that specific platform. Some of you may not like this next one, but influencer sayings are like my biggest social media ick. Think of the things that you hear all the time. Hey everyone, everyone's been asking me about X, Y, and Z. Come and get ready with me for X, Y, and Z. So a while back, a lot of influencers started using these terms because that is what helped them grow community, and it was essentially true. People were asking them about things. They were genuinely getting ready for events. And that's not where I think the ick comes from. It's that a lot of times these things have now turned into trends and people start to overuse them because they think they're gonna find the engagement and the successfulness of an influencer if they kind of just copy their format, or if they copy what they're saying or copy their content. And for me, as I'm scrolling through a feed and I continuously hear, get ready with me for this, get ready with me for that, it turns into a gimmick or a tactic, and it is very, very annoying for an audience member. It has gotten to the point now when I start to see those type of things, or if they're speaking in that type of way, I tend to scroll past the video. And I know I'm not alone in this. And while this might feel like a little bit of tough love, just be aware of the different terms that you're using that seem to be a little bit popular and a little bit gimmicky, because sometimes those buzzwords sound like nails on a chalkboard to your audience members. And my last social media ick is ultimatum content. Now, we've seen a rise in this a lot lately, but essentially ultimatum content, the way that I see it is people that only promote one thing. They say, this is the only way you can do this. This is the only way you could obtain that. This is the only way you can do X, Y, and Z. And don't get me wrong, I've been very guilty of this in the past. And while speaking in these ultimatums, it's a really great way to formulate a hook and kind of generate hype for your piece of content. It is a slippery slope to some unethical marketing, and quite frankly can pigeonhole your content. So as an example, it would be something like if I said the only way to grow on Instagram right now is through Reels, when I know there are plenty of other ways to grow an audience on Instagram. But I wanted to drive hype and kind of use a bit of scare tactics to encourage my audience to buy something from me, to do something my particular way. Speaking in that ultimatum can really cause a lot of stress for my audience members, and that's not what I want to do. Or if you're a finance expert and you say something like, you should only invest in crypto right now. Again, you're leaving part of the story out, you're leaving part of the narrative out, and while that might seem like a great hook, it's just a slippery slope to pigeonholing yourself and unethical marketing. And a lot of the times when these ultimatums are made inside of content, you're speaking from your own experience and not necessarily everybody else's. So for me, I hardly ever jump on stories. For me, it's not a strategy that works, but I know that there are plenty of people in my industry that preach jumping on Instagram stories as part of a content strategy. And for me, I could jump on here and say, Instagram stories will never work to grow your audience, because that's kind of my lived experience. I only use it for community engagement. Whereas there are plenty of other people out there that use stories to actually help them grow. Okay, now that we've kind of gone over my biggest social media icks and maybe how you can kind of transform them if you see them popping up into your content, I want you to go and watch this video here where I talk about my top 5 content creation tips. And as always, if you have questions, leave them in the comments below and don't forget to hit subscribe.